Hello my friends, we are facing probably one more step in escalation of this war since we got the reports that Russia is gathering aviation closer to Ukrainian borders. The information about it comes from the two independent resources. One resource is in Russia and the other one is just the Western media. And what they say that Russia moved 40% of their helicopters and fighter jets closer to Ukraine, around 200 kilometers away from the border. As for the strategic bombers, they don't really need to move them around because they have the long range, and also the cruise missiles that they may fire also have their long range. And based on this move of the tactical aviation, we may state that there is the probability that Russia may use the aviation in Ukraine massively. And there is also the chance that they could be successful in that as well. But before we're gonna speak about it, let me tell you about the Atlas VPN, the partner of my video, because they came out with a big deal with a huge discount for my subscribers and viewers. You may hear that I'm not the native English speaker, and what helps me to improve my English? Honestly, watching the live shows on Netflix. My favorite series to study is Friends, but it's not available in my country, but then I turn on the Atlas VPN. Well, it is now available for me. I also rent my current house with a great discount using Atlas VPN. For example, Booking doesn't have the fixed price and it may vary depends on your country. So by changing your virtual location, you may find the best price. Atlas VPN encrypts your data so it's out of reach by the government, unknown ads or hackers. And yes, believe me, your personal account may be vulnerable, especially when you use the public Wi-Fi. Atlas VPN has the breach monitoring service that helps to prevent the hacking of your devices, so then I see the warning message I disconnect from the public Wi-Fi. Atlas VPN helps me to access services and websites which are blocked in my country. I know why, but Patreon is one of them. My friends, and now please check out the link below where you can sign up for the 3 years offer for $183 per month, where you can have 83% of discount together with 3 months for free. This limited offer is available with my personal link and it expires next month, my friends, so hurry up to join the club. Atlas VPN does the great job supporting Ukrainians, and recently their mother company participated in the event where they gather resources to purchase the special radars for the Ukrainian military, and they donated around 1 million euros. Atlas VPN, thank you so much also for sponsoring this video. So to understand why Russia has the option for this strike, why they have probably decided to do it, we need to go back to artillery problem. Today there was one more video released by the Wagner soldiers, and they show how they practice the firing towards the Russian generals Gerasimov and Lapin. Wagner says, however, that this video was staged by Ukrainians, and maybe it is like that, but yesterday Wagners themselves filmed that they have the big problems with artillery shells, showing lots of the bodies of their soldiers in the hospital, and they blame those guys, the same guys, for not supplying weapons for them. And as this conflict shows, artillery still plays a great role, especially in combination with the modern-day technologies as drones. Drone basically does the surveillance job, and sometimes it may drop some of the bombs, but the main job is done by artillery that is guided by the drones. And why Russia was successful in getting some of the ground near to Bakhmut, Marinka, in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, because they use artillery a lot. Usually they gather lots of the artillery systems and fire simultaneously lots of the rounds at the same specific space, destroying everything around. I call it firewall. And they move this fire forward and forward with the same artillery systems, and basically destroying our cities, villages, towns, and obviously Ukrainian forces with it. This tactics was developed even before the Second World War, but Russia is using it all the time. And yes, as you can see here on the map, with the ground that Russia was able to take, this tactics is quite successful sometimes. It may allow army to move forward, as it was with the Soviet soldiers who used Katyushas in the Second World War. They used those rocket artillery systems massively, and it was quite shocking for that time for the Germany side. It is really a mass destruction weapons, and also the aviation bombs are. And here you probably already understood why we are speaking about the artillery systems, because we're gonna go to aviation side very soon. Well, it wasn't really the problem for the Soviet Union to use the artillery so massively, because their entire economy was working for the war. You see, this tactics creates many of the downsides. First of all, you are destroying everything that you want to capture. In this case, you're destroying the infrastructure that you want to capture and the buildings for your soldiers to cover. And in case of the backfire from the enemy side, also with artillery, you'll have lots of the losses. That is what we see from the Russian side in this war. They have dramatic losses. And that is the big problem for the Russian Federation nowadays, because they were not prepared to use the artillery so massively before the war. Yes, they have some of the ammunition shells in production, but still they haven't put their economy to the war rails and unable to produce as many shells as they use on the front lines. And that creates the huge deficit in ammunition for the Russian side. The first time I spoke about it 2 months ago, and now we see the real problem. Then Russians started to use the artillery shells produced in 2022. It was already understandable that they are in lack of that resource. And yes, I know that some of the military experts say that Russia still has lots of the ammunition shells. It's the ex-Soviet country, they have lots of the storages, but actually not. For the 30 years of the independence and corruption in Russia, they sold lots of the ammunitions to their allies like North Korea, Iran, and actually they want the ammunition back from North Korea. But the North Korea refuses to give those shells back to Russia because they have their own enemies, let's say. Also, according to statistics, Russia started to use artillery 4 times less on the front lines. And about their losses, they start to lose 4 times more people also. So now you can see this relation, and I think that is why Russia last year announced the mobilization and took 300 more soldiers into their army to compensate the starving in artillery shells. They used not this firewall strategy, but the meat wall strategy, and I can confirm it personally because I speak with the friends on the front lines and they say that they are going and attacking our positions like zombies. And one more minus in using the artillery so massively as Russia did before is that you waste the resource of the barrels of the artillery systems. And in that case you should have the perfect logistics and lots of the artillery units to replace. Also, you need to have lots of the factories to produce the new barrels for the artillery systems and repair the old ones. And you know what? Russia still doesn't have it, at least massively. And speaking about their logistics, well, it's the nightmare for the Russian army, and it always was. Because of that, there are 2 reasons why Wagner soldiers doesn't have their ammunitions near to the Bakhmut. First of all, Russia is in lack of that ammunition. The second one is the confrontation between the private Wagner army and the Russian General Command. This conflict lasts for many months, and basically Russian generals want to make the Wagner army their own army, and after the failed attack of the Russian regular army on Vuhledar, then they lost 155th Brigade of Marines together with their ammunitions and tanks. Russian command decided not to give the new victory to Wagner in Bakhmut, and they cut all of the supplies for the private army. Yes, still Wagners have some of the ammunition shells, but basically none is coming to support them. And that's why they turned back from this road. They were forced to do it because the Ukrainians sent some of the reinforcements there, and Wagners have nothing to respond. Basically, it's more or less standstill situation near to the Bakhmut. I was 90% sure that Wagners would be able to take this part of the city. Still, there is the possibility, but in general, I'm quite optimistic about the city, that it will stay under Ukrainian control. So you see that Russia has no options on the ground, but the only alternate that they may use is the aviation. Before, they were very careful with their aviation, even though Ukrainian army was able to hit many of the helicopters and the fighter jets, but now they want to use their aviation massively. And as I said in the first part of the video, there are some of the leaks from the Russian General Command that they have taken the decision to use the aviation aviation in Ukraine massively. This information was published on some of the Russian resources as well as in a Wall Street Journal. So their attempt would be to create the massive aviation attack on Ukraine, destroying the anti-aircraft and anti-rocket systems that Ukraine has. That's why now they launched some of the cruise missiles to analyze the locations of our air defense systems, and sometimes they launch the cruise missiles even without the warheads. Also, many of the balloons were spotted in Ukrainian airspace, and usually they carry this rectangular, triangular shape of the metal construction, and for the air defense radars, those balloons with those constructions look like the air targets. And I have the personal story to explain you the idea. My grandpa was the military aviator, and he used to fly the Antonov 12 surveillance airplane, basically AWACS of that times, but it didn't have this kind of big plate on the top. It looked like the standard Antonov 12. And in most of the cases, the airplane was painted with Aeroflot standard civilian livery, and the pilots were wearing the civilian uniform. The only difference was that there were lots of the antennas stretching out from the fuselage of the airplane, and it looked like the hedgehog. And my grandpa got the missions in Africa, where Soviet Union got their influence, and also in Middle East. And before the Iraq-Iran war, where Soviet Union supported Iraq and United States supported Iran, yes, Iran was the normal country by that time, my grandpa did the surveillance job for Iraq. So their job was to come closer to Iranian border with some of the bombers accompanying them. So the ground radars were activated to spot the Tupolev 95s, big bombers, and they spotted those ground radars from the Antonov 12 surveillance airplane, basically creating the map of the radar systems and aviation defense. And then the war had started. Iraq already knew the locations of all of the air defense systems radars, and there were the first targets of Iraq. And here Russia uses the similar tactics. They launch the cruise missiles from different directions, simulating the air raids. So in case of the massive aviation attack on Ukraine, they may understand the location of the air defense systems, but it's not really that easy, because the modern day air defense systems are very mobile, and if we have the smart generals controlling the air defense of Ukraine, we would constantly move those around Ukraine, not to let the enemy to understand the position of the air defense systems in the current time. But Russia may still use their aviation massively. They may create few waves of that attack, and it may last, I think, for 1 day, not more. And I guess in the first wave, most of the airplanes would be shut down. The second wave should be more successful. If they target all of the Ukrainian airfields and air defense systems, basically they may freely fly all over Ukrainian territory. In that case, they may use the aviation bombs to target all of the bridges across the Dnieper River, and Dnieper is dividing Ukraine basically into two parts, and honestly there are not many bridges across this river, and Russia may potentially cut Ukraine in two parts. Plus, they may target all of the supply lines from our Western allies to Ukraine. In that case, Ukraine will obviously start the negotiations, because our main group, our army, will be left over here without any supplies. But it's a very risky move for the Russian Federation. If they decide to do it, they are in desperate, because they may lose all of their air forces. You see, now we have lots of the air defense systems successfully performing their duties, destroying the most part of the Russian cruise missiles. The same will happen to the Russian airplanes. And the most Russian planes were built in Soviet Union. If they lose them, there is no way they can compensate those losses. The factories are just gone many years ago, technologies were lost, and they cannot produce new MiG-29s or something. Plus, the last year they stopped the productions of the Sukhoi fighter jets, because they are in lack of the precision equipment that came before from the Western countries. And since there is the talk about using the 80% of the Russian aviation for the possible massive attack in Ukraine, it means that the Russian command isn't desperate. As an alternate, they may mobilize more Russian men to the Russian army, but Putin already lost many of the points and many of his people who left the country. And 2024, the next year, is the election year for Vladimir Putin. It is very close, so he cannot afford losing more points, and also he needs to show something important that he done on the front lines. So aviation could be the visible option for Vladimir. But again, that option may totally destroy the Russian army aviation and also reputation of Russia. Just imagine the big graveyard where are the hundreds of the Russian helicopters and the airplanes. It's crazy. But if they have decided to make it happen, it should be in around 2 or 3 weeks during this period. Because more air defense systems are coming to Ukrainian army and they cannot afford those high risks. So I guess that is why they're moving their attack airplanes closer to Ukrainian border to try this massive attack. But I'm almost sure that in that case Russia would just lose their airplanes. And about the front lines, my friends, there is no big change for today. That's why I concentrated on this aviation artillery topic. And don't forget to check the link for the Atlas VPN for their limited big deal where you can get the Atlas VPN Premium for $183 per month plus 3 months for free. It's the huge discount, which is the time limited. So grab this opportunity and join the club. My friends, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.